Welcome to another short segment of tea leaf reading. These are tea leaf reading cards by Karen Dalton Smith, available at tealeafreader.com. And the beauty of reading tea in a teacup is you're basically scrying. And within scrying, and specifically, or I should say, especially within tea, you're not only scrying, but you're looking at what the symbols are in the leaves to you, what that means to you, and the direction that they're facing also has significance, as well as the symbols that are around them. Now, there are many systems, Lenormand, Gypsy Witch, Kipper, which employ a similar system of reading where the cards or symbols around the main symbol that you're reading will have more influence or will change the reading depending on how close those symbols or how far those symbols are away. And that is a similarity, but there's a lot of differences between tea and Kipper and Lenormand. The tea leaf reading cards, which are, they can be very similar to reading Lenormand or Kipper. Kipper and Lenormand both read in a structure that it's very structured, and it is very much based in that often that final card will give you more of a final result, kind of like a Celtic cross spread with tarot. Whereas tea is read fluidly. You put keywords together between the cards or the symbols, and you form a sentence. But the cool thing about tea cards versus like Lenormand and Kipper, and the mindset you need to get out of if you're coming from that direction, is that this is a fluid system. So depending on the symbols around it, it's going to color that symbol, and it's also in what order the symbols come along. So we're going to do a quick lesson on that today. And again, I'm using the cards here rather than a teacup. And this really, I find this method works for me in the cards, or it's more important in the cards than the cup. I think the fluidity of what's around the symbols in the cup comes more naturally. Karen's decks, please ignore this. I had to write a note on my hand earlier. Karen's decks, her newer decks, come with some sort of symbol, some sort of cheat code to tell you which direction a symbol is facing. Some of the cards are neutral, and some of them face a direction. Both these cards have direction. Some of her new decks have arrows. This deck has little teapots, so you're looking at which direction the stem is facing. Some of her older decks do not have the cheat code, and you just have to look for which direction the symbol is facing. You can see the house is on an angle here, and it's facing that way, and that's where the stem is pointing that way. If you have an older deck that doesn't have the directions, sometimes you may get confused. If it's a tricky symbol or a tricky card, I think what's most important is that you decide how you're going to read it, and your cards will kind of follow suit and do that. Just pick a direction and stay in that one lane. One of the cards that can often be hard to see, and one of the reasons she started with these little cheat codes, is the grave. And she put a little star on this side to show the light side, or the positive side, and the negative side. But even still, she later added this little cheat code in. So depending on which decks you have, those are some keys that you can use to figuring out your directions. But now it's like, what do we do? Okay, so tea's fluid. What does that mean? The cards are facing, the symbols are facing different ways in the card. What does that mean? When we're reading house and grave together, it's going to read differently in this position than it will in this position. So the keywords for house. Let's talk about, let's say in the reading if we're, let's say we're doing a reading about a family who's sick. If we're asking about whether or not they're sick and we pull grave house, the keywords for grave, one would be illness, another would be death, or, this can also be transformational. It's also, it's very dependent. It has positive and negative meanings depending on which side of the card things are facing and depending on the surrounding cards. So in this case, just looking at the directions of where the symbols are in relation to one another, if the house is behind the grave or on the dark side or the negative side of grave, we could call it, then this would be a house of sick people. So if you were doing a reading and this popped up, you could see this family might be sick. Now, if you're looking into this same family later and you pull the cards in this order, now you have a family that's on the positive side of grave. So there's a transformation from being ill. So they're getting better. Now you're probably thinking, but this house is facing away here. Well, it's on the sickness or the negativity would be going away from the house. The house is going in a direction away from the grave. So you could, so in some ways you could say, oh, but it's going away from transformation. But if you look at the direction of grave, it would clearly be worse this way. So don't overthink it too much. But two symbols together, you're looking at the negatives and the positives and deciding if this is this in a reading, even if it wasn't about a family that was sick, I'm seeing a positive symbol and a positive symbol, or this would be positive based on this being a positive symbol and it being on the positive or lighter side of the symbol. Now, again, in the same situation or same reading, no matter what the context is, the grave and the house together, this is a positive symbol. But now with the grave, with it being on the negative side of grave, it gives us more of a negative feel. So this would be guard yourself against these things as a way to put it in a positive spin, but it's got kind of a negative connotation. So that's how you see the positives and negatives in tea. Similar, now let's go for a little more cards. In a similar situation, the sword can be read as powerful and taking your power, and it can also be something that is cutting and painful or negative, something that cuts away. And again, where the light side is the positive side. Oftentimes in her decks, my go-to has always been where the handle is where the power is, and what the knife blade is cutting away. So in this situation, depending on how you personally see it, maybe you would see the positive side as being, the T is facing this way, so maybe that's always positive for you. Again, if that's how you phrase it, go for it. For me, while this is facing that way, to me it's saying this is what's being cut away, and this is where on the handle side is where the power is. So that's how I personally read the knife card, and that's how we're going to be reading it today. So if I got these cards, and again, it doesn't matter the order because tea is not linear, it's fluid. It's about what symbols are around it. So if I got these tea cards around the knife, or even, well, let's leave it at this, okay? I would say, is the knife here powerful or is it negative? And you look at the symbols around it, and these symbols are all, the butterfly is transformative. It's also very fluffy and light. The key is a very positive symbol. It's one of the best, most positive symbols in the deck. Angel, again, it has no negatives at all. The treasure chest, again, a very positive symbol. It could be greed. That would be, a negative, for that particular symbol. But in general, these are positive symbols, so it's going to color this into a positive light. So it's more of the power, take your power. With treasure chest, it would be, again, this is value, this is power, knowing your worth, knowing your value, and kind of accepting that, having that belief. Again, this would be belief, believing in yourself, things like that. So this would be a kind of a very positive take on the knife. Now, if you had gotten these symbols with the knife, these are all fairly, again, this symbol, depending on what it's around, can be very transformative and phoenix rising from the ashes, or it can be toxic, as two examples of keywords, but it depends on what's around it. So what is around the mushroom? A negative symbol, a negative symbol. This can go either way. This is a little less negative, but when you add everything else together, when I put these two together with negative symbols, I think a robber. That's one of the combinations that I would think of there. And it doesn't matter which side that's on, because either way, there's a victim robber kind of feel to it. On this site, it might be more about be careful that you're not the one in a dark alley getting snuck up upon and getting cut. Whereas in this direction, this might be the masked man who wields the power. But looking at these symbols together, whether you're looking at the mushroom or the knife or the tornado or the mouse, no matter what symbol you're looking at here, the fact that there are other negatives around it kind of color this to a negative. If I saw this many negative cards together, I would be like, not in a dramatic, horrible way, but definitely in a what's going on with the situation way. And this is, somebody's getting shanked here. So there's that. But like mushroom and tornado together. Now this by itself would be an interesting kind of, a very interesting read. Because you're like, well, is this getting spun up and fixed? Or is this like super toxic? And again, that comes down to which direction it's facing. So here's your assignments. Using these two cards with the tornado facing this way, for this is what it's picking up. It's picking up, or rather, this is in its path. This is what's being moved, and what's in back of it is what's being cleaned up, essentially. That's the positive side of it. Kind of reminds me of like the tornado. In a positive light would be like when you do spring cleaning and things have to get better, or things have to get worse before they're better. So this is the worst, and then after things get better, after they go through the process. A tornado is often, or could be, a symbol for the needed painful process or the needed challenging process. The mountain also has a similar feeling of it's not a blockage and it's not a direct no. Sometimes it's a no, but oftentimes it's just a challenge and you have to find another way, or another way out of the box, kind of like Snake. And this is very similar in that, like, you have to go through the challenge in order to get out, but they have different nuances. So I'd like to hear your feedback. How would you read tornado with mushroom. Think about your different keywords for tornado, your different keywords for mushroom, and putting together this context of the mushroom being in the way. What's happening here? And then also, now read it this way, putting your keywords for mushroom here and your keywords for tornado here. If the mushroom is coming out from the challenge, how are these two different? Post it in the group. Let me see your answers. See you later.